Today we're going over all the best weapons in Darktide in solo and group situations so it can help you make the perfect build to breeze through the game and get to level 30 as fast as possible with a ton of crafting materials. And it isn't going to be a traditional tier list video because a lot of these things need their own classification. So we'll be breaking it down into 4 categories, one for each class and a general category that are all going to be timestamped already. And I will share my final thoughts at the end about how I really feel about all the classes and what role they play in the game. And if you've been watching, you know I've been testing literally everything and farming T5 with a mix of everything. So if you gain any value from this, I'd really appreciate the sub. And lighting this off, we're going to start with something that'll make any weapon in the game good, and it's simply just a damage stat. Its max roll is 80% currently, and it can make any weapon that you like an absolute monster. And if you have a melee weapon, going for damage and finesse will make it have a massive increase in damage. So now that you know how to look for the bare minimum of what a good weapon would be, we're going to start with the non-class specific weapons. And the best one in the game is easily the MG7 long barrel lasgun. You can get it on the veteran, the Psyker, and the Zealot. And even a gray worse version of this gun outperforms the MG4 by quite a bit. I know that a lot of people really enjoy using the MG4. I do too because of its rate of fire, but there's no doubt that the 7 is just that much better. It's insanely good and lets you obliterate light to medium targets at an unbelievable rate from insanely far away. And a lot of people say it's the best all-round weapon in the game because it's so good in so many situations. And considering that versatility and being usable by multiple classes at such a high level, I kind of have to agree at this stage. It's just a good all-round weapon. Unfortunately, it just can't deal with heavy armor, so if a swarm of crushers pull up on you, you might be in a bit of trouble, but I think I've only seen this happen once in a green moon. And it might actually be the Zealot's best ranged weapon in the game if your party doesn't need a flamethrower. But as for the full auto recon lasgun, there's no doubt that this thing has a really good spot at cleaning up hordes, light to medium enemies. It just does a lot of things that the infantry lasgun does really well, but the quality of life that the scope adds to the actual infantry lasgun makes it unmatched. However, the recon lasgun totally has its place, and if you really like it, it is a really solid pickup. As for melee weapons, a knife or a sword with bleed while it's broken are super good until it's fixed just because of the synergies, and the rapier has potential, but it's outshined by any of the bleed weapons and any of the class weapons pretty heavily. As for leveling, this is the only time we'll talk about it. The braced autogun, the infantry autogun, and the shotgun are all really good, but any of the MG lasguns will hard carry you in almost all the situations, and if you're lucky enough to get an MG7 early on, with a decent damage roll, it will carry you through the majority of the game. But now for the real main character of Darktide, the veteran sharpshooter. And a lot of people say this is the most overpowered character in the game right now, and after playing all 4, I would probably say this is true, but I think the other characters just got nerfed and should be brought back up to where they were to their former glory, just to balance the field out. I think that all the classes have a role that they should play, and I think the veteran's role is perfect right now, and the other classes just aren't where they should be. And in my full veteran guide video, I classified it as an elite hunter, and I did a full breakdown of every single weapon in depth. So of course we have to start with the bolter. This thing melts absolutely everything that you come across, and it is probably the best gun in the game when used on the veteran sharpshooter. Its only weakness, the heavy sway, can be compensated for with a trait, and honestly this thing is just good in every single situation. Light, medium, armored, it just deletes absolutely everything. It's good in solo queue situations, and it's even better in a pre-made group situation. Between that extreme damage for single target AoE and underrated suppression that just makes everything so much easier, it really lets you feel like you control the pace of the game. So it's absolutely one of the best weapons in the game, especially when you use it with all the veterans feats. It just makes it an absolute monster across the board, compensating for all of its weaknesses. And I know you can use it on other characters, but for instance, if you're playing a Zealot, I really think you should use the infantry lasgun over the bolter, especially because it's so hard to shoot far away without the anti-sway perk. But I will talk about the Zealot's best combos later. Now for the plasma gun, it's an absolute monster that a lot of people dislike simply because of the overheat mechanic, but it can provide that extra gameplay loop that keeps things interesting if you're a little greedy or dumb like me. Oh no, not again. Oh, not again! Now, since it can one-shot even the hardest elites, which takes tons of pressure off your team, and when you get used to just normal shooting it, you can hip fire any light to medium target across the map in just one hit too. So while it does take some getting used to, it is a very hard carry weapon that just takes a lot of practice. Because when you get good with it, you can actually melt monstrosities and bosses like butter, but it's definitely more of a team-focused gun with less solo carry potential, because if you get overran, you can't really do anything like you can with the bolter. So while it is good and does have the longest reload in the game, it can't really defend itself very well, so you need to practice with it, and you need a team to make the most out of it which is why I think the bolter is just better than it. Now, the Hellbore last gun, the MK3 variant is the only one that's relevant, and it needs the onslaught blessing, or it's just flat out garbage. So that's a level of added RNG to put onto it. Plus, it's a sniper with no scope and a charged up shot. So if you do the math, it easily looks bad, but it has a ton of potential. And I really did show off its true potential. Its damage level is absolutely absurd, and it is one of the best weapons in the game currently. But it's just absolutely not fun to use and feels janky. So personally, I would stay away from it until it actually gets a real scope. But now for probably the best melee weapon in the game that absolutely does everything the best, it's the Power Sword. Be it AoEing a horde of mobs or just melting elites, it literally does everything the best. And all you have to do is get high damage and finesse, and you'll actually carve through everything like Jason at summer camp. So overall, Power Sword plus anything, and you'll be set with the best combo for everything in the game, basically. But your best elite hunting build is easily the Power Sword and the Bolter. Your second best would probably be the Power Sword and the Plasma Gun, but I know a lot of people just hate the Plasma Gun. And then obviously the Power Sword and the MG7 Infantry Last Gun will be your best all-around deal with absolutely everything build, and it's probably one of the hardest carry builds in the entire game, just for dealing with absolutely everything. Because if you get good at dealing with armored elites with your Power Sword, that just lets your Infantry Last Gun take out everything else with no problems at all. Now for everybody's favorite thing to have on their team, the Ogryn. The Slab Shield is easily one of the hardest carry weapons in the entire game and trivializes every map and almost every single situation, to the point that even bots can perform well when you have the shield up. It's actually so good that it feels like you taunt everything into it when you have it up, and once you play a game with one and without, you'll immediately notice the quality of life you're missing out on by not having it. Advancing while blocking is extremely underrated and makes any of the tight situations or pushing chokes just absolutely easy mode. And its special weapon attack is just plant the shield and you don't lose stamina when it's getting beaten up, and it just makes you an absolute unkillable monster. So things like demon hosts or any monstrosity actually just get put on easy mode. They just spam attack into it and your team can just blast away on them. And if you plant it in a choke and have like a flamethrower behind you or something, it makes the game an absolute joke if a horde's coming at you. So as your second best, you have a big old butcher knife that sweeps the hordes up really no problem. And with the bleed perk, it works insanely well with your feet. So it's a really solid runner up to the shield for really fast speed runs if you're just farming for materials. And as for the ranged weapons, the Ripper Gun with bleed is an absolute monster for Ogryn, and it really just makes you an unkillable Goliath Chad Lord. The high rate of fire, good armor pen, and feat synergy is everything you dream about, and it's all comboed into this insanely fun to use weapon. But taking a look at a weapon is probably just as good in my opinion as the heavy stubber. It may not give the bleed, but some of the perks for it are ridiculous, and again, it has an insane rate of fire, good armor pen, and the amount of suppression this thing brings to the table is ridiculous. Like, you pin everything down and really nothing can even fight back when you're shooting it, and it's just insanely fun to use at the same time. So when you try and compare the shotgun, the grenade launcher, and the grenade gauntlet to these two, they don't really measure up, but they still have situations where they can be good and fun to use. But if you want to be the best and absolute strongest Ogryn, I would really recommend using the shield paired with a Ripper Gun or a stubber. It just makes you so insanely powerful, and all around, like, every situation just becomes an absolute joke for you. But now for our third class, the Zealot. The Eviscerator Chainsword is easily one of the flat out best weapons in the game. Anybody who's used it knows what I'm talking about. The AoE and single target are just out of control, and you can stun lock enemies. But the real power play to this two-handed chainsword is that you aren't forced to animation lock yourself basically ever. And with the heavy attack, block, push, reset combo, you can cleave through any horde no problem and most elites. And just across the board, I would say that it's actually just better than the Thunderhammer right now. I think the Thunderhammer needs a buff, but the Thunderhammer is not a bad solo elite hunting choice. And with the added AoE heavy swing attacks, it makes it a lot more viable. Plus, the ultimate charge heavy swing combo still wombos every single elite in the game pretty much in one hit. You can just delete anything you want because when you ult, it makes it an auto crit. So the Thunderhammer definitely has its place, but I think currently right now the Eviscerator Chainsword is just too good to not want to use. And then its only class specific range weapon, the Flamethrower, actually deletes everything in the game. And on CBT, there were groups recruiting 4 Zealots, 4 Chainswords, 4 Flamethrowers for just fast, insanely quick runs, and it was just ridiculous. And it's easily one of the most slept on weapons in the game because I keep seeing people say that it's bad. It's actually god tier. The stagger on the mobs is too valuable, and it legitimately melts every single thing in the game way too fast. And your best combos on the Zealot are going to be the Eviscerator and the Flamethrower, or the Eviscerator and the MG7 Infantry Last Gun. It really depends on what your team needs, but both of these really let you control the flow of the game and keep it at a pace that's comfortable for you. Now, the infantry last gun, again, just absolutely hard carry. So I think on the Zealot, it's probably one of its best weapons, and it really just lets you hard carry your team. But now for the last and most controversial class, the Psyker. Now, since it's unwarranted nerf, I really do think it's much better played as a support and an area control character. So the Lightning Staff does it the absolute best. AoE CCing everything and making anyone with a big W key a very happy boy. Its damage is pretty average, but overall, the support level this thing brings is unmatched. CCing everything all the time is just too good to not want on your team. And again, it lets you control the pace of the game and slow it down if your team gets overwhelmed. And you don't even have to full charge it to take advantage of it. The Psyker in my main party has been running this thing and actually feels like he's carrying us on T5 Endless, and everything is noticeably easier when we have the staff in the party. So I really do think after seeing it in action, it's absolutely one of the best weapons in the game. And as for the other staffs, I think the fire staff is pretty good for that shorter range, light to mid CC, kind of like the Zealot flamethrower, but it actually requires a charge time, and you do need a teammate to make sure you don't get hit in the back or just beat up as things ignore the stagger from your flame, because I noticed that's a problem with the fire staff, as mobs will sometimes just sprint through it and punch your dick off. Now for the trauma staff, it's a great nuke, and it can be really good if your team needs a long range artillery piece. The only problem I had with it is it does require that full charge for you to deal with a lot of the elites, but only like a half charge to deal with hordes. As for melee weapons, a lot of Psykers have been going for the rapier, but the force sword lets you quell, so it's too good not to use, and its damage is really solid, and it honestly is a shame we didn't get the force axe or two-handed sword, because it really would be cool to see more variants. But for now, I just guess you use the force sword with a lightning staff. I think this is the best combo, and after Eternal Prof broke down the different staffs to me, and having him use each one in my party, I really felt a noticeable difference in the amount of control the lightning staff brought to the group, versus the other staffs really didn't feel that amazing to have on the team. But every single time I have the lightning staff on my team, I actually feel like I can turn my brain off and W key even the hardest difficulties. So I think that the force sword lightning staff is the absolute best combo for the Psyker right now, until they bring the other staffs up, until they buff the class. I really do think the Psyker needs quite a few buffs right now. But playing it as an AoE CC support really actually does make it feel very impactful. And I do know a lot of people want to feel like they have a large impact on the game, and I think that's the best way to do it. Now, like I've been talking about, I think each class has a role, and trying to remove that role doesn't really make sense unless you are running multiple of something. So if you have 4 zealots, for instance, 2 flamethrowers and 2 infantry lasguns can round out the squad for you to just W key the whole map and have basically zero problems. But from another POV, 4 flamethrowers might leave you weak to a sniper or ranged, but you look really cool and have a lot of fun. So while I did list off what I think are the absolute best weapons and the best combos for each character, just so that you can absolutely min-max, I think if you find combos that you like, you should just use them. There's a lot of feats, perks, and blessings in the game that make things a lot better than they usually would be. So comboing those together, if you get lucky, can make something work that otherwise wouldn't be very good. So if you find something cool or a fantasy that you just enjoy, you can definitely find a build to make it work, and you should. Honestly, don't let people loadout gatekeep you from using what you want. Just have fun and enjoy playing out your 40k power fantasy. I know mine was a plasma gun and a power sword, so I just got lucky that both of those things are insanely good, and I use it basically every single day for at least a couple of lobbies, and I'm absolutely in love with the combo. So let me know what your favorite weapon combo is, or if I missed a potential one. There is always more to learn and more room to grow, so I'll keep the interesting ones pinned as an updated comment. For now, it's been Clay. Have a great day.